Hello, one another couples, and welcome to another episode of One Another Marriage Podcast with Dr. David and Theresa Mabry, where we seek to strengthen marriages for greater satisfaction and fulfillment and greater impact on the world around you. We're so glad you're with us.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in today or whenever you're joining in.
That was sing-songy.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I guess it was.
I love it.
Hello. Hi there. Hi there, folks.
Hi there, folks.
So, hey, I'm going to unpack the episode for today. So, David and I recently sat on a panel with some other married couples who also work with marriages in some type of a professional capacity. This panel was actually for Barclay College and in Haviland, Kansas, and it was for one of the undergrad classes. It was one of the marriage and family psychology class, and if once again we'll give a plug for Barclay College.
Yay.
If you're interested in looking into more from them.
And a reminder, if this is your first episode, that I actually am the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies for Barclay College, and we do have a Master's of Arts in Family Ministries, but this was an undergrad course.
Right, so this
and
was
we
undergrad.
Were a guest via Zoom, and we do also offer a really strong psychology program at Barclay College, and this was an on-campus group that we were Zooming into.
Correct. So the students that were in this class, their professor had broken them down into 4 different groups, and each group was putting together a question to ask the panel. So they offered questions for discussion, and in this episode, we thought it would be great to explore each of these questions with you. Through them, we will find out what was on the mind of these students and learn a little bit along the way.
Yeah, we really felt that they were insightful questions, and it was so cool to get them because these are. I would guess every student is single. They're between the ages of like 19 and 22. They're in that category, right? So
yeah, and while we could see that some of the students, there may be one married or something that we're unsure of, but for the most, they are single and young and college age, and it's just fun to sit in and hear their perspectives sometime. And we are the age that we are far enough removed now from those ages, and so it's kind of like, oh yeah.
Which, hey, I'd like to give a shout out to the professor. Shelby Williams is the professor. She is a wonderful scholar, counselor, and she chairs the undergrad psychology program for online. And so if there's anybody out there that wants a really good psychology program online from the comfort of your own home,
exactly, then
you definitely want to look up Barclay College. It's affordable.
It's very affordable,
and it's a solid program. It's a strong program, and Shelby Williams is a wonderful person to study with and under, and her whole team that she has teaching there. So she's the one that facilitated this course because she goes on campus. She travels over to campus to teach this course. Even though she lives outside of the Haviland area. So that's why we got the invite to go in there. So, yeah.
So it was a fun time. All right, so you gave a shout out there, but I have the shout out to one of our listeners today.
That's right. You have the shout out to our city.
To our city.
Which could have multiple listeners there in the city.
I don't know.
We don't know. There's numbers that keep popping up.
Once again, we just see views that are there. So anyway, though, Frankfurt, Germany.
Frankfurt, Germany?
Yeah, we have traveled across the ocean.
Aye.
And so we're headed to Frankfurt, Germany. And so thank you if you are the listeners listening to us from Frankfurt. We appreciate you. And
Yeah.
and I wanted to give this shout out as a little special reason, because as a teenager I visited Germany
Yes.
with my high school. I was an exchange student for about 3.5 to 4 weeks, and so I actually went to Frankfurt, and we actually flew in to Frankfurt, and so that was a cool experience because we got to spend like a couple of days in the city there,
Yeah.
and then traveled on to our destination, which was in the northern part of Germany. But yeah, that was
That's cool.
such a great trip, and a lot of great memories, and just very, very cool to see the German culture. And I really enjoyed it and loved it, which I figured I would, because my brother had went, and then each of us had hosted a student from Germany, and so I was really looking forward to it.
What can you tell us about Frankfurt, Germany, hon? What kind of fun facts? Do you know any fun facts about Frankfurt, Germany? Can you say hello in German? Speak of the Deutsch. How do you say that?
You say "Sprechen Sie Deutsch."
There you go. Because you took German. I know.
Yeah.
I took a little bit of German, but it's different. A different kind of German.
Yeah, but my German. I mean, yes, I took 4 years in high school of German, but I just don't speak it enough. Now, the funny thing is that in my pre-K class of kids, I teach 4 and 5-year-olds. I'll do German with them every now and then. So we count in German, and there are certain words that I remember, or phrases or things like that. So I do teach some of them the German. Plus we talk, in Spanish sometimes, and then we also do sign language.
So Guten Tag.
So Guten Tag.
That's
yes.
hello. Good day.
Yeah, good day.
Good day.
Yeah.
So that's our greeting to whoever our listeners in Frankfurt, Germany is. Guten Tag.
Say Guten Tag. Ich heiße Theresa Mabry. Ich wohne in Powell, Ohio.
Nice.
Ich bin oh man, how do you say 51? Ich bin I'm blanking.
Oh no.
I was going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ich bin 15. Yeah, that's it. Ich bin 15 Jahre alt. There
you go, folks. Hey, to our dear German friends, there is as personal of a shout out that we can give to you. We're so glad that you are listening, and folks, we're so glad that all of you are connecting. Those of you who are regular to our podcast, we really appreciate your loyalty, and that you are a one another couple, because we're convinced that, number one, your relationship, we're hopeful that your relationship is being strengthened, and that you're able to have an impact on the world around you. So yeah, shout out Frankfurt, Germany. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I have a puzzle.
You do.
And it's a pretty simple puzzle, but I thought I'd bring it because it's kind of more to illustrate why we do the puzzles, because we do puzzles, folks, in order to kind of model and encourage you all to connect about things that are deeper than just doing business or whatever. And this may sound kind of silly, but my puzzle right now is, did I take my supplements today? I don't remember.
Oh man.
Okay, so we're recording this on.
That's not a puzzle, dude. We have the answer.
Do I have the answer? Because I don't remember.
So you before you answer
though, is that we're recording this toward the evening, right? And so I usually have a pattern for my day,
yes,
where I know exactly when I take my supplements. And so folks, and we'd encourage, we're not doctors. Oh, well, I'm a doctor, but not that kind of doctor. And so I would encourage you to take your supplements, stay healthy, and so yeah, stay well. And so we do take regular supplements.
We do.
And whatnot. So we're pretty religious about that, just to keep not fanatical, but we're regular. So did I or did I not?
I don't know. I don't know whether or not you took them. I know I did today, but the answer to your puzzle as to why you can't remember is because you're old. That's why. which is why we also take the supplements.
Oh, no, because we say even those that are younger should be taking supplements.
Yeah,
and so
all of our kids.
That's at least our opinion.
Yeah, well, because it is good for your health and well-being.
It is.
And we also would have some very specific supplements in mind, not just any old vitamin that's out there on the
and
shelf.
folks, supplement is not code for anything illegal, by the way. So we're not doing anything that's shady. And so it's everything that you can get at your regular store. But we try to do this. It ties into marriage and the fact that we take supplements together, meaning that we're on a regular pattern together, and we try to we hold one another accountable. We just had that today. We helped one another say no to extra dessert, and so that's a team effort because we both really wanted dessert.
Not even extra dessert, just no dessert.
No dessert, yeah.
It's not like we had dessert and it was like, oh, I want more. You can have extra dessert today.
Yeah. So we've been good for one another. So that's my puzzle is I can't remember whether I took them today. And typically I can remember. And I was just thinking, what's my puzzle? This is something I would tell you. If we were sitting watching TV in the evening, I would turn to you and say, have a puzzle. Mm-hmm. Did I take my supplements today? So...
Well, and I don't know why you can't remember because you still were in part of your routine. So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, we went somewhere. And
but you were up first. You still had breakfast. You still had, so you still had part of your routine. Yeah. Yes, it was an off work day, but still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here nor there at this point, that's my puzzle, and I'm glad to be able to share it. But let's dive into the questions so we have plenty of time for these. And
awesome.
Once again, we are so grateful for Barclay College for the opportunity to be on this panel before these college students. And one of the reasons we wanted to bring these 4 questions, number one, we felt like they were insightful and they were helpful, and we thought that one another couples would appreciate the processing of these questions, and that you all as couples could discuss these same questions with yourselves as couples, right? And so as we answer them, as we process them, we don't come with all the answers necessarily. We want to really encourage you to process the same questions together. And secondly, kind of a minor thing, but still important, is what's going on in the minds of college students about marriage. And this doesn't tell the whole story, but it does kind of give insight into what's kind of either troubling them or they're wondering, since they've not experienced marriage, but they've only experienced it through maybe their parents or other adults within their lives. So that's the idea behind them. So, Theresa, you actually have them. And so why don't we just walk through one by one, each of these 4, and you all can play at home.
Right. Yep. So question number 1 came with the topic of conflict and understanding that conflict is going to be present. And so the bulk of their question really centered on, did you ever fight in front of your children?
Yeah.
And so that was a very that was a fun question to kind of answer. And I remember on the panel, like we spent a good portion of time, I felt like, unpacking this for them, because I think, once again, like you said, this is insightful to the younger generation. And I think we're always going to see that people are people, and that there's, in a room that size, there are those who have grown up witnessing conflict on a daily basis, and it's not been taken care of well.
Yes.
And then there are others who have grown up who have never witnessed conflict because it was hidden. And then there are others who may have a small snapshot of, hey, yeah, I know that my parents may have fought, but I also I saw resolution to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of came out in the discussions. So for you and I, it was fun because we had discussed this topic with our own children back in the spring.
Yeah.
And when we were doing Facebook Live, and we had done a session, I had done a session with our daughter Taylor, you had done a session with our sons Alex and Gabe, and we had talked with them about what they saw in our marriage that was a pro or a con or whatever. And all three of them kind of agreed that they felt like they never really saw us fight.
Yeah.
But they saw tension or conflict or disagreement. And sometimes we had discussion in front of them. But for the most part, we kind of went off and had that moment like on our own.
Well, and let's be abundantly clear here, and we have shared another podcast, and this helps with context for our answer, which is you and I have never really had emotionally charged disagreements, so fights. So when we say fight,
right,
we've never had yelling matches. Very rarely have we ever done that, and we've been compatible. It's not like we haven't had disagreements, but secondly, we've always had a value of not we don't air our dirty laundry, right? We don't. In other words, when we do have a disagreement that we need to have some intense conversation, we're going to pull away because it's our business. So with those two things being kind of laying the groundwork for the context for our children is, yes, they didn't see a lot of it because, number one, we kind of learned how to, and we practiced healthy practices an awful lot. And when we didn't, we would still pull aside. Not 100% of the time, but that's probably why they didn't see it, is because we kind of had this value to pull aside. Now, add to that our children's feedback then was that, hey, we really maybe didn't pick up maybe some of those healthy practices of when it really does become intense from being modeled, right? That was the point,
how to resolve it.
Yes.
Yeah. So what they saw was they saw us later on, and we were back to, laughing with each other or holding hands or doing whatever. And it was obvious, like, okay, mom and dad aren't upset at each other anymore, but they never saw the tool or the means by which we went about solving, which I can understand. I can understand that, that you got to be able to show your kids that there's a way to go about it. Now, I think what came out in the panel, though, which we agreed with, was that, one couple still had kids in the house. Us and the other couple, we are empty nesters. And so the couple with the kids in the house said, which I remember doing this, is sometimes when those disagreements happen or that conflict is happening and there's tension, or you can tell that mom and dad are upset, sometimes a parent is with a child and that child may ask, like, are you and mommy okay, or are you and daddy okay, or whatever. And so there was always the conversation of, yes, mommy and daddy love each other and we may be disagreeing right now, but we will work this out.
Which to that.
So there was confidence given in.
Yes.
Just because there's conflict doesn't mean it automatically goes to divorce.
Yes.
Or that mom and dad are going to forever hate each other or whatever. And kids need to understand that because it's hard for them to process.
Yeah.
So that was helpful.
And the big takeaway from that point would be, one of the big takeaways is age-appropriate processing with children. And because if you have a 6-year-old, you're not going to process the same way than when you have a 16-year-old.
Absolutely.
And so being attentive to where your children are at, and folks, your children cannot handle adult level conflict management.
Right.
They can't. So you help them where they're at to resolve conflict where they are developmentally.
Right.
And go from there.
Yeah. All right. So, second question. This was kind of unique too. Was there any marriage advice that you received as a young couple that you also applied and still use?
I remember when this question was asked, I think I struggled maybe, or I didn't have a really
Yeah.
solid answer because
Yeah.
before I got married, I had very little advice from or no advice from parents or from
Mhm.
family. Now as I reflect more and after this moment, maybe premarital counseling that we did with,
Mhm.
which that's what came out of this is the
Right.
importance of premarital, but the pastor that married us was also a good friend. And there were probably some things in that session. I just don't remember them.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't know whether necessarily this group was looking for like those gold nuggets, pieces of information. I don't know. Like sometimes you think of like the saying on the greeting card or the tagline type of deal, right? And so the funny thing that I think this was a struggle for all three couples on the panel, because we've been married a long time, and it's hard to remember, like, unless it was that, when it's an emotional connection with someone and it burns it in your memory, right? I think there's a lot of advice given. I mean, if you have a bridal shower, there's advice cards. If the wedding day, you're maybe talking with a lot of people and there's advice thrown out or whatever. But if it's really, truly someone that's close to you or it's a poignant moment, then you may have memory of it.
Yeah.
But I said for us, I mean, I remember just a lot of advice coming from those who were much older and having been married was just, always strive to love each other and then to forgive.
Yeah.
And so, and I feel like that's something that we've applied and we still use, and it's something that we share with others as well, is that, listen, like this, when you marry someone, it's not just a bed of roses all the time. So, and I feel like a tagline that you always say, marriage takes work.
Yes.
And it does take work.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm certain that someone said that word to us. Someone and at some point said to you and I, marriage is going to take work. You hear it at that point, but you don't always, you don't always.
Well, you're young and
recognize it or
in
remember it.
love.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that seems to be common of advice, and I'm sure I know we heard this. It's just, but the idea of do not let the sun go down on your anger, which we've talked about in previous podcast, that the idea we would embrace the principle, but not the rigid. Now, if you can resolve conflict before you go to bed, that is a best practice. But it's not always reasonable or attainable. Sometimes you need to have the night to kind of sit on it, or conflict hasn't happened so late and you are not going to have a reasonable solution. And some couples have shared that we stay up all night in order to resolve this. And sometimes, if you want to do that, but the principle is don't sit on it too long. Resolve it.
Right.
So I would let me throw one more in that I remember now that we're having this conversation. And it wasn't advice from anyone we knew, but actually, this is so funny how we remember.
It came from a greeting card.
It's so funny how you remember certain things, because I remember where I was driving the car.
Wow.
Where I was driving in Alliance, Ohio.
Yeah.
And where I was on State Street when it came on the radio.
Okay.
This guy said the basic idea that he shared was to reject passivity as a husband. And I remember that distinctly challenging me. It was early in our marriage, very early, because of where we are on State Street, especially as driving to our original apartment, right?
Oh, wow.
And so this was early on in our marriage. And I remember, I don't think I was being passive, but it was a challenge to say, you need to lead, not lord it over, but lead, and your wife needs you to not just be a bum and sit on your backside, but you need to be active, and you need to be decisive and partner with your wife on those decisions. So yeah, that's something I remember early on, and
Wow,
maybe
huh?
that I applied. I think I already had that in me, but it's moments like that needed to stir it. And I'm hoping that maybe this podcast is that for some out there, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have it in you, and maybe something that we say will stir that in you and cause you to be the best version of yourself for your marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I can honestly say you have not been passive. So there
Yeah.
you go. You
Thank
have
you. Yeah.
you have applied it and use it today, and I guarantee that you've had that discussion with both of your sons
Yes.
now that they're married as well.
Absolutely.
So,
It was a key
there you go.
theme for them growing up, and
Okay.
the beauty is that not only our sons, they seem to be rejecting passivity, just
Mm-hmm.
seeing the evidence, but our daughter as well
Mm-hmm.
is really proactive. We're so proud of our kids.
Yeah.
They're awesome folks.
All right. Question number 3 was, and this was a good one too. Once again, though, this kind of, even when the question was asked, you could just almost like feel that youth in the question, right? So like,
which is fine, by the way, right?
Yeah,
Because
it is fine.
It's just where they are.
It's just where they
we were
are.
the same place.
Yeah.
At one time.
But I also think it's part of our culture right now, and that you'll hear that in the answer in just a minute. But here's the question. The question is, how do you build your relationship or marriage without sacrificing your own identity?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you could just hear like, well, I'm a person, and I have my own individualism, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I may agree with marriage, but
It's someone that
how
doesn't want to
do
lose
you?
themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Let's deal with this first from the truth of the issues very real, particularly for our hearts go out to women who may sacrifice who they are completely for a man. And that's not always the case that direction, but
Right.
a lot of times we've seen this too, and I think this may have come from because a female asked it, and I'm curious if that may be one of the challenges is how many women enter into a marriage and they end up laying everything down and feel like they lose all of themselves. And maybe I'll present the question, and maybe you need to speak to it more than I, because I'm a guy, right? And so, but the idea that we do know women who this has been a struggle. So that struggle is very real, and that's the question. There's where the question we really want to answer and say, you don't have to lose your identity. The balance to that for both men and women, no matter what gender you are, is that you do have to lose yourself for the relationship to be sacrificial.
Yeah, you got to sacrifice.
But not in the sense that you have an identity. And so you had a great answer. I'm going to let you give what you gave to the group, because I think you took the lead on that answer and did an excellent job. But I wanted to make sure that I hit that it's very real when someone does truly completely lose themselves, and it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But selfishness is a problem, and individualism is a problem when it goes to an unhealthy side in the other direction.
Sure. And part of my answer is, and we've said this multiple times in our podcast and other platforms, is that when you're married, you're together as an us and not just an I, and that I said I was going to pull out the best in you forevermore, and you said you were going to pull out the best in me. So if that's truly how you view each other and you view your marriage, you will want your spouse to have some individualism, because there are different gifts, talents, and abilities that each of us have, passions to pursue and things. And so we should be efforting at allowing each other to pursue those. And so I was sharing how, there was a certain point in my life that you encouraged me to get back into running. And I did that for several years, and that was really a great time for just me to go out and do something on my own, and by myself. And as well as there have been, I think I shared that you've always been much more of an avid reader than myself. And so there were many times where you needed to just have alone time to read. Sometimes it was on the back porch. Sometimes it was, in the living room. So, but I was okay with that. It was okay that you were taking time out to go read, and maybe I was still doing stuff, I don't know, around the house, or the kids and I were still here or whatever. But it was all right that you pursued your passion of reading, type of deal. And so, I wanted you to do that because I knew you would come back. It wasn't like you just sat for like 10 hours a day and ignored us. So you would come back in, and a lot of times you came back in more refreshed.
Yes.
Just like I would come back in refreshed from doing something on our own.
Yes. You running made us a better couple. Me reading made us a better couple. When we had areas that we were able to pursue individually, hobbies, interests, relationships, friendships, like when you hang out with your girlfriends, it makes us a better couple. When I hang out with my guy friends, it makes us a better couple. It's when those other things replace the marriage, that's unhealthy. And so it's that balance. But our exclamation point needs to be selfishness and individualism kills marriages. And if that's the source of the question of, hey, you know what? I want to live my own life and be married. It's like,
or it's always your decision. So the we or the us in the relationship is lost to the I, because that person, you always choose the place to go eat. You always choose the vacation destination. You choose what TV show you watch. You choose, that is just exhausting for the other individual.
When one dominates.
When one dominates that much, there's no room for anything else. And so I felt like that question also was coming in like that. And I guarantee that someone in that group has observed that in their own family to a certain extent, and it's a turnoff. It's like I will not enter into a marriage where that's going to be present like that.
Yeah.
So it was a good question.
It was a great question, and I'm glad that that group of college students are wrestling over that question, and it's also one that probably every couple that's listening needs to probably ask the question of how is there balance between.
Well, and that's what you had shared was on the backside that individualism kills marriages, and that there's that balance of connectedness and closeness, right? And you can't be too smothering with each other, and at the same time you can't be too independent of each other. So you got to have that interdependence with one another, which hopefully, the group that had that question, as much as they don't want to lose themselves, I hope that they also see the benefit of marriage. Yeah. Just because you marry someone does not mean you lose yourself.
It is possible to empty yourself from all selfish ambition and know who you are.
Absolutely.
And that's the key. And I know that's a hard teaching and understanding for some that may be listening. But folks, as much as you can to come to that understanding, we would point to, because we come at it from a Christ-following concept and the idea, and in the Bible, there's a passage in the book of Philippians, chapter 2, and it talks about emptying yourself of all selfish ambition. Now, that doesn't mean that you sacrifice who you are completely identity-wise, but it means you're handing your identity over for others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a hard teaching for some, but it's fully possible.
Right.
And you make your marriage better when you know who you are and when you sacrifice for the other.
Mm-hmm. All right.
It's a fun paradox.
Okay, last question. Question 4.
Let's do it.
How did you create a couple identity and not remain dependent on your parents?
This sounds like it came from college students.
Yes.
Which is totally, and I'm not saying that as a mocking at all. I say that as a legit kind of like, that's a very real challenge for young couples, particularly, of learning, cutting the apron strings, as well as having that couple identity and having, like, we are our own, we are a family now, and at the same time valuing your family of origin when you can.
Right. Well, and that was good because it was a family of origin question.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always good to talk about. And I felt like that was, we all gave different, slightly different answers. It was interesting to me that the 3 couples on the panel, one spouse shared about coming from dysfunctional families, and it was super easy to kind of like cut apron strings.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like you were constantly calling those parents to say like, hey, so what do you think I should do about this? Trying to make the decisions, right? And then the other 3 of us came from very kind of like connected, healthy, we enjoyed each other, type of families. And so that's where that whole balance kind of comes in, right? Because it would be easy to just constantly go one direction.
Yeah.
And the one couple did share that and the young man, he was the one that came from the more solid family, and he was challenged in that first year of marriage by someone outside of his family who watched him make a lot of decisions over that year in the marriage, but he would always talk about talking to his dad, and this other guy finally challenged him and said, you know what, you are the man in your marriage, lead, stop talking to your dad. And he talked about how he was kind of angry about that question, but it caused him to reflect, and then he turned to his wife and realized, there's probably some of these decisions you and I should be making.
Yeah.
And our family will just deal with whatever the decision is that we make, right? And not allowing the father figure to continue to answer questions for them.
Yeah. Do you remember early on for us any times that there was a challenge for kind of having our own couple identity and not being dependent on parents? I can remember a couple stories, but do you they come to mind?
No, I think for me there was a little bit of there was a personal one, just like not continuing the decision to not continue to be a substitute teacher and to just step out of that because I hadn't gotten a full-time gig.
Yeah.
And I remember having to share that, and my parents weren't super excited about that decision, but at the same time it was like, I'm kind of done.
Yeah.
But that wasn't so much you and I as a couple.
As a young couple, though, it is challenging because you really do need to have that separate identity, but your parents really do offer, many parents offer an awful lot of help, advice, guidance, and sometimes true, healthy physical help of some kind, financial or whatever, sometimes when it's healthy and balanced. And so,
which is what kind of came out at the end of recognizing that parents can be a resource, but they can't be the first go-to person. You got to turn to each other, and then if you're still struggling with a decision or figuring something out, and you decide as a couple to go and ask for the help.
Yeah, the key is that you're working together as a couple for that.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I worked through one early on. It seems like a really silly one today as we look back multiple years. But do you remember? I remember. Once again, it's one of those things where I remember where we were sitting in the apartment.
Oh, gosh.
I was sitting at the table in our kitchen. We were this tiny apartment. I was sitting at the table. You were standing in the kitchen, and we were talking about cookie recipes. And I said, let me call my grandmother and get the recipe. And you didn't like that at the moment. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but I don't think it was necessarily about just getting the recipe. There was a question as to how I was going to do the recipe or do something. And you said, well, I'll just call Grandma and ask her how she did it or how she does it. And I didn't want you to do that because I felt like that would show that obviously you didn't trust that I was going to figure it out.
Well, I think
or that you and I would figure it out. And folks, just full disclosure here, David's mother and grandmother were fabulous cooks and bakers, okay, especially bakers of different things and baking. That was not a strong suit of mine. And so I felt like I felt like you were just stepping over that boundary.
Which is why I bring it up as an example, because I believe that is a really good example to the question. In that moment, we really did need to have our own kind of identity and kind of work through it ourselves and not necessarily bring it. And it brought tension and conflict.
Yeah, because I didn't want to be inept. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, you want to bake something? Absolutely, go ahead.
But today, but back then, the best path, what we would encourage, is to work through it as a couple. But we had to trip through that and have that tension in order to reach a better place in our relationship and our independent identity, and not being dependent upon parents so much. To put closure on it, I have to mention this, though, is that we're at the phase where we're learning as parents to give space to our married children. Right. And that, I think, it's just a quick hit at the end here for this question, and that is, the question was asked about forming a couple identity and not being dependent upon parents, but sometimes parents need to learn to allow their children, and we're learning this day by day, allowing their children to have their own identity, but at the same time have this value in family of origin when it's healthy. And so that's, for us, that's the case. So those are all good questions.
Which we did share with the class as well, that we are now in that role and being challenged by that. And we hope that we're doing a good job.
Well, we hope this has stirred up questions for you as the listener today. So those 4 questions, once again, are, and maybe you can process these if you have not listened, stopped it, talked about them, and whatnot. But the 4 questions would be: did you ever fight in front of your children? Any marriage advice that you received, applied, and still use? Number 2. Number 3, how did you build your relationship without sacrificing your own identity? And 4, these students asked, how did you create a couple identity and not remain dependent on your parents? So how did you answer each of these? Will you process those together? And maybe you, even by yourself, think through those a little bit. And maybe some of the items that Theresa and I shared kind of maybe gave you some insight and helped you in your own marriage today and helped build it up. And so we hope so. We hope it's been beneficial to you.
We really appreciate each of you and taking the time to join us this week. Hey, and we want to send you off with our verse of the week, which is found in Romans 15:14. It says, I myself am convinced, my brothers, that you yourselves are full of goodness, complete in knowledge, and competent to instruct one another.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts particularly, or your favorite platform. And if you found value in this content, then hit that share button and help other couples to be strengthened. We are so glad that you joined us this week, and we will see you again next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.